Welcome everyone, Dr. Thor here. Get ready for Gnosis. So I want to bring up an important subject matter that I've been talking about for a long time. Matter of fact, I've been studying Satanism and satanic cults for over 40 years now. And those who've listened to me understand how I came in contact with these things as I ran up against these leaders, particularly the head of the Temple of Set and his followers, who were involved in the writing runic books in particular, and from the famous Roy of Hollywood, Roy Tuckman on PFK Radio out of Los Angeles, which you can listen to today. Look him up, Roy Tuckman, Hollywood Tuckman on PKFK, I believe, the radio show, and they need money. So everybody should go out and donate a few bucks to them. I certainly have, and see if we can help keep Roy on the air. He's been there for 30, 40 years and has assimilated lots of actual information on all sorts of spiritual topics. He was the first place I heard Terrence McKenna. So many other people he features on his show and used to play these at, say, one of these midnight type shows. Very much the precursor to Art Bell, with a lot more quality and a lot more quality people. So keeping this in mind, this is a great reason. So check him out. And you can listen to his show online no matter where you are in the world. And you'll find some very interesting things. They're rare interviews, rare taped programs. And what he spoke about quite a bit back then was Michael Aquino, the Special Forces Major Intelligence Officer for the U.S. Army, with one of the highest clearances you can get, who was heavily involved, being stationed out of San Francisco and kind of being from that area, was heavily involved in the Church of Satan with Anton LaVey. And when they broke up, he formed the Temple of Set with basically a bunch of other radicals from that church, including Edred Flowers, otherwise known as Edred Thorson, who runs a Nazi runic-type group, so is it alleged. Who studied in Germany and, of course, was involved with all the black magic cults in Germany and the Desaad Society of Germany as well, the black magic, apparently, practitioners of sadomasochistic sexuality, which he's even written a small book on. He's worked with people and claims to have great friends like Llewellyn Publications. Well, that's what he stated. So all of these things go deep and dark. Now, of recent, I've been listening to Manny Grossman, and do look up his channel. I think I'll leave a link down below. And he covers the Son of Sam killings and basically has lived in the area where that Son of Sam, David Horowitz, was very active in. And of course, I read the book, The Ultimate Evil, and many, many years ago, because I followed all of these things. There has been a direct link between satanic cults and lots of different activities, particularly on the Mexican border, where there's huge amounts of Satan practitioners, and of course the gangs that run things and continue to this day, particularly street gangs, are all heavily involved in satanic worship and practices. They have taken over all of occultism and have now it's kind of looked at as a joke. When someone is involved in some sort of satanic practices now and they're stated this, there's basically, ho-hum, who cares? The entire radionic industry is ran by Satanists, and they readily admit it, and again, ho-hum. There are a few people not involved as far as I can tell, but who knows? They certainly aren't coming out and saying anything about it. Cowardice rules. So the whole idea is that Listening to Manny here, he brings out a lot of those things that I've forgotten about after reading about all these satanic cults. And of course, this was a big problem, I believe, in the 80s and early 90s, where it was on TV. People were talking about Geraldo Rivera, etc. We're talking about the son of Sam, who eventually admitted that he was part of a satanic cult. And a lot of people used to laugh at this. The Ultimate Evil book went into that and started stating who these cults were. And these cults had stretched across the country, affecting groups like the Manson people, who were pawns and involved with a lot of other satanic groups. The Process Church, which has been accused of just about everything, apparently were involved in this and were doing all sorts of very debased satanic practices, of course, blood sacrifices of animals and humans. Manny goes into a famous park, Ottomeyer Park, in the suburbs of New York City, and talks about all the strange things happening there. There are all sorts of cult activity going on there. Animals, particularly apparently German shepherds, numerous of them were found chopped up, their heads chopped off. There was a lot of people arrested in that park for child pornography, and cults would hang out there in general, and people met them, and they would talk about their practices, and ironically and bizarrely, because they were in wooded areas, they even had the audacity to call themselves druids, and that they were doing all these animal sacrifices and praying to the tree spirits. Well, certainly sacrifice, as much as a lot of pagans don't want to admit it or say it was minor, pagan groups are heavily involved in human sacrifice. So were all of the groups in Europe in general. Certainly the Romans sacrificed to their gods, animals. I don't know how much human stuff went on, but who knows? I mean, I don't know why people should think that they're special. I'd sacrifice a human before an animal. At least, animals serve a purpose. So what do humans do? So the whole idea is that there's a lot of child pornography tied with this. These groups are tied into organized crime. There's a lot of connection there. So the scope of this is mind-boggling. So the mind-boggling aspect of this, and it goes on and has carried on to this day. Now, there were heavy satanic cults going on connected to rich and powerful, and this was in the 60s. So we're talking about 60 years ago, and nothing really happened. I mean, they caught these rogue people, and I'm sure they wanted to, like David Horowitz, who shot people randomly. I guess 3 he claimed to have murdered, even though there's much more murders than that. And he was involved with a group. And apparently there's groups all over there. The reports of horrendous things happening in parks, such as human sacrifices, animals being cut up, was the commonplace back then. And of course, you never have anybody do anything about it. There is so much corruption, it is frightening. And of course, your so-called law enforcement really has never had the courage to go against things like this, and most of them seem to have been paid off. And this continues to today. And of course, you're going to remember that a bunch of really evil, murderous gangs aren't going to be walking around preaching good philosophies. They're going to go with the most debased there can be. Now, and that's Satanism. Now, Satanism, everybody thinks that Satan's just Lucifer. He's just your little buddy. He doesn't mean anything. He came here to help mankind. It was the fallen angels that taught mankind all the trades and so forth. Well, this kind of skewed thinking and taking certain documents which really have no validity. The certain books written out there about the fallen angels that escape my memory right at this point, doesn't mean that they're valid. Most people look for divine inspiration to go up to a master's level. Well, I was doing this kind of work, and over the years, I figured out how to do it. Well, where did it come from? Well, certainly you are just a channel, so it has to come from someplace. The impotency and the general cowardness of commonplace religions, whatever they are, certainly have done nothing to this. They have furthered it with the really corruption, particularly within all Christian church, but the Catholic Church with their millions of victims, that so-called priests and the cover-ups involved is horrendous. And one nunnery in Europe, I believe, they found a graveyard with hundreds of fetuses in them, which the nuns gave birth to and then murdered and buried them because of the horny priests who impregnated them. Well, this is pretty horrible. It's bad enough with their bizarre pedophilia, but this didn't always only stay there. So, I mean, what kind of history is this? Well, it's the history of religion. It certainly isn't Christianity alone. All religions are really filled with a bunch of deviants. That's what religion breeds. So, but the answer to not being in a traditional religion isn't going to the dark side and being worse than the religions we have now. That is some sort of answer? Well, it is not, obviously. But it has come to the point now that Satanism is totally and completely accepted. I'm really shocked to see people wearing satanic symbol shirts all the time. Now, you know, it's amazing how things sneak into your consciousness. A lot of these symbols were started by these heavy rock, acid rock, what are they called? Acid rock? Heavy metal bands. Who used a lot of these symbologies. It wasn't the strength of just having strong images of pagan gods and other things, which certainly were not infantile weaklings like Christianity wanted. They certainly didn't show their gods dead on a stick. So it wasn't the embracing of these kind of symbols, which do have a certain purity and connected to the earth. And there's something very nice about pagan earth-based religions. But they are very limited. But it isn't those symbols they use. They use symbols of demonic figures, and particularly with the inverted pentagram, which is a whole nother story that people don't quite understand at all. This came from Ephes Levi and the Baphomet. All of this is very misunderstood, and I think I did a couple of videos on that. I'll probably do more on the Baphomet and the pentagram, etc., which is so typical of dark magic people that have no imagination. They stole it from somebody, just like all the symbolisms all these dark level practitioners have, like the Nazis. They didn't invent anything. They stole symbols from everybody else. We need to understand that and where everything comes from and have some basic education here. But it's interesting to hear these stories again, which I kind of refresh my memory of these many books I read about. Anything that had a satanic element to it, in, quote, true crime books, I read back in the, 80s, 90s, whatever it was. Now this information comes up again, and it's very interesting. But what these people don't understand, and what Matty Grossman doesn't understand and wants to stay in this niche that he thinks people are interested in, is that there's a whole new crop of Satanism that he has no idea about and is not necessarily willing to embrace going against these people. As a matter of fact, the author of the Greatest Evil book shied away from getting into the aspects of the rich and famous involved in satanic cults, I should say the rich and powerful, because of the potential problems there, including these spillovers into organized crime that runs everything, and particularly New York City and, well, any towns for that matter, any big cities, which are involved in all this. But what is frightening is the acceptance of what they want to do slowly, and that was to make Satanism, as they are doing right now, into something that means nothing. And people actually, and I heard this one woman talking about how to empower herself, and she was talking about, well, you visualize the darkness. Now, where does that come from? Nobody ever visualizes the darkness to manifesting. Everything in life is basically built out of photons. Sun-type energy, light energies manifest are in everything. If you concentrate on the darkness, you are disempowering yourself. But this is common now. This comes out of it. Now, I've seen these satanic shirts, and I just saw it again on a famous celebrity in the news. Now, I saw this with, not too recently, but on Kevin Smith's comic book show, where he actually has these three guys that he works with, and one of them has on several occasions worn a satanic upside down pentagram. While this is, these are sold in all the shops now. Well, the rock stars wear this. Well, maybe that was shocking them, and I'm not even sure what these people's true beliefs are, but this is a shocking emblem, anti-society, anti-everything, which a phase people go through, but heavy metal groups have been wearing this consistently. Now, going back to the comic book men, which details, well, Kevin Smith has been on for 7 years, put this together in his comic book store in New Jersey. Red Branch, Red Branch? Or Red Bank, New Jersey, where he grew up in that area. And he has several friends of his that he knew from high school, and they work in the store and are part of this little show that shows old toys and everything else. It's kind of a fun little show. One of the persons, and there's about three main people that are in his show that he highlights that work or, quote, run this store or involved in his filming of this store. And that is Ming Chen, Walt Flanagan, and Brian Johnson, who, at least Brian Johnson and Walt Flanagan, have been in most of his movies with bit parts. From what I understand, Walt runs the shop. I'm not sure how much work Ming Chen and other people did. Apparently he put together their website, etc. I'm not sure if that's important to anybody. Brian Johnson, which apparently doesn't work in the store but is one of his friends, has been seen on several occasions in that show wearing satanic t-shirts. Now again, these are things, this is with the rock band. Well, I'm not sure that. So if the rock bands had something that said "kill your mother" on it, would that be taken okay? Is that okay? Oh, it's just fun rock stuff. Now, I have nothing wrong with heavy metal. Some of it I quite like. They have strong themes, and Judas Priest and other people. Their music, which I got into a few years ago at a certain level. I listen to everything. I found some of their songs were very powerful. They did even a song, and I'm not sure if that was Judas Priest or whoever, did a song about somebody being abducted, and they have strong themes, and I kind of like that. Some of it, of course, is just garbage, this rattly screaming, but I'm not sure that's heavy metal. I think that's more punk rock or other things. Screaming in the microphone doesn't really do much to anybody. But, whatever you're into. But here he's wearing it on this very neutral show. Nobody thought anything of it. Kevin Smith, who's kind of this bizarre, radical, strange guy who hates religion but loves it. Go to church every movie premiere, he stated. He's got some really weird... this guy, as far as I'm concerned personally, is quite a strange fellow. Strange sexuality, strange everything as far as I'm concerned. And I'm sure he does some of this to gain attention, but here's a guy who's a fairly radical Catholic, grew up in that religion, even though he claims that, he made this movie that was kind of anti-church, but was it? I'm not sure it was, and he has publicly stated that every time there's a new premiere or a new picture coming out that he goes to church. Odd for somebody if they don't like church. So here's a strange thing. So he thought that was not something to say anything about. And Brian Johnson's a big dude. He looks like he's about 6'2", with the big beard. He looks even Viking-ish, but he doesn't wear a Viking-ish shirt with a hammer or Thor on it. He wears a symbol of Satan. Now, what's come up recently with all this, which I find even more fascinating, is this recent problem on the Rust movie with Alex Baldwin. And the armorer there, Reed, Gutierrez Reed, who was the armorer there, was on TikTok. And she made a lot of provocative, sexy-looking photos and has allegedly been involved in some financial domination, sexuality to bilk men out of their money. I don't know who's bilking who there. Anybody who's so stupid to pay somebody in that kind of way, who gets off on having a woman take money from them. But there's some psychological interesting turn-ons there, because males are so abused by women that it's a bizarre sexual fulfillment. But lo and behold, what is she wearing on her t-shirts in some of these photographs where she's semi-nude, flashing, whatever? It's the upside down pentagram. She's wearing a satanic shirt. And this is okay? You know, all these people that rationalize that these things are okay should look about the horrible murders, torturings that are going on and have been going on by Satanists, and who they're involved with. The people trafficking, the generation of rape houses where they kidnap women and people go to. And these are gone to by a lot of people. I even found out a person I knew was going to rape houses. And of course, this was very typical of this very deviant person who's involved in all sorts of strange sexuality. And of course is now working as a criminal, which isn't surprising, but he was in the aerospace industry. So these kind of people who are involved in these practices border into your life. But it's perfectly okay, because it's just an alternative thought form. Michael Aquino, Colonel Michael Aquino of the Special Forces, an intelligence branch, was the head of the Temple of Set. He made sure that Satanism was taken into the army and verified as a religion. There's a chapter in the chaplain's book of the army, of all military, I think, stating Satanism as a legitimate religion. He did that. He also was instrumental in putting on the reverse flags that we see on all the uniforms. Now, people want to say, well, this is just a flag moving forward, and if you have it on a pole, well, that's what it looks like. So, this is nonsense, because it's been created recently. This is not something that was created previously. And I always watch this. I love to watch 1940, 50 films on World War II, or even any military films prior to the 60s, to see what the flags on their uniforms look like. And none of them are using the reverse flags now. And I think that's an abomination. But it fits with the military as well, who basically aren't the good guys. Of course, that's not everybody. But the good guys never stand out in front. And if they do, they're generally murdered and thrown in the grave. So here we are with a number of these. And you see these shirts popping up more often than you think on people who think this is some being tough, or it's representing a particular band, or whatever they wear these things for. But I'm not sure that anybody who carelessly wears this thinking that it's kind of fun or insulting understands the meaning of this and what is connected to satanic cults in general, which is disease and death and perversion. These people have been connected to massive child molestation chains, pedophilia, the murder of animals, and I believe that almost all higher ups seem to be involved in these cults, or at least connected to them. It seems to be the same thing we've heard from people like David Icke and other people about these basically satanic rituals, where people and animals are sacrificed, and this is part of the trauma that goes into controlling people. If we look deep enough into all these things, they're all connected to it, because almost all of organized crime, and particularly street gangs, are all connected to this. And this is pretty much a fact. And I know 100% that it's a fact, because I've been harassed by the leaders of this, and I have checked out all the occult groups, the publishing in. Every single one of them, particularly in the publishing industry, are directly connected to Satanism, and even having to the extent that they are supporting it with their money. And this has been going on for a long time. And the connections to certain things, like they want to blame the Manson family for being kind of independent. Well, that doesn't really seem to be the case at all. And they're trying to say this is just a radical Nazi group when they really were connected to this long chain of things. Just as David Berkowitz was connected and started to talk a little, and then somebody cut his throat and he stopped talking. And he almost died from it. And you can see interviews of him today. You'll see a giant scar there. It's amazing he didn't die. Well, the point is that this is not a joke, people. But now there's everything else in this prison camp hell that we're in. And of course you have the very corrupt churches who are basically working with all these people either indirectly or directly, supporting very satanic groups like the military, the police department, and of course the politicians in general, who are all taking bribes, if nothing else. Well, the bottom line is bribes are not given to you by the nice guy. Ministers are not on the street fighting Satanism. They're not in the street stopping the murder of people on the streets that are being shot by law enforcement. They're doing nothing. These churches make millions and millions of dollars and basically help very few if you want to put the amount of money they have in resources against what they do. Certainly some charities help, but helping and so forth, well, this is highly debatable. It's like so many, quote, non-profits. What do they really do? And what percentage of their money is going to the cause and not to administration? Now, so many charities, 90% to 95% of the money they collect go to administration. They're basically paying you're basically paying for those persons' jobs so they can try and figure out how to do something. But, we got to pay them a lot. Like the Red Cross, the leader of that, gets $1 million a year, and many people underneath them are getting $500,000 a year. So the point is, there are millions and millions that have to be raised just to pay for a few executives. And zero of that money goes to any causes. So what do we have? So you're talking about really sick programs here. Bob Dole, who died just recently, his wife was appointed the head of the Red Cross, or however that works, as part of a political payoff, I allege. So this is the kind of little things you get. So he ran an election that he knew he would lose. He didn't really have a chance. And of course, he was an old guy, and he bit the bullet for that party. Just as what happened in another election with Newt Gingrich, who's that guy from Utah, escapes me at this point, who ran for, he had no chance of winning, and that was, so you get rewards for that. That's how the political system works, because nobody who has a chance in the future wants to do that, because you lose an election once, most likely you're not going to be able to win another one. But when we look at all this stuff and we understand what's going on here, it's quite frightening. So people readily admit, particularly online, there are people, particularly in the radionic industry, they have guests on that readily admit that they are Satanists. We have Satanist, the head Satanist, E.A. Kenneding, has publicly stated that his mentor, and it's on film, and I have copies if they've taken it down now, but I'm happy to supply the link, that his mentor, E.A. Kenneding, was Carl Wells of Magitech Frame. Now, this is not coming from me. This has been stated from Kenneding. If this is incorrect, well, then they should need to state this. But since I had a business partnership with him in the past, I know exactly what he was in, and this is the reason I broke up with him. Is that he was going in dark places. He caused all sorts of problems with the organization, trying to break me up from the master of translations, who translated all of our grimoires, Robert Blanchard. So a lot of shenanigans went on there, and this was all part of people involved in negative practices. So this is what's been stated, and this is all okay. These people can, and I have posted a video on that, which has very little viewership. Thank you, YouTube. Interesting, YouTube. So the whole idea is that all of these things that have to go with these situations here are quite interesting. So the growth of these very bizarre things, apparently there were some horrific things going on, particularly in New York State and in these particular areas of the suburbs of New York City. which are now being documented. And these things have been recorded by the police. These things went on. We have the whole book of Son of Sam with Berkowitz, and he talks a lot about this, and then he pulls back because he was afraid, apparently. And this guy who wrote this book, The Ultimate Evil, Maury, who apparently is ex-PD, pulled back from this because of the fear, because these Satanists were heavily connected into wealthy and powerful. And I think we could pretty much confirm that. And this was all part of these things that we've been hearing about, which has been carried on by David Icke, and how all these people are into these practices. I personally believe this 100%. I think there's an awful lot of important information to come out proving this. Yet, the investigations carried into these things conveniently come up, like so many investigations, that nothing happened. I believe the FBI came out after investigating this and said there was nothing to it. Just like there's no organized crime, as the FBI stated. So we have really serious problems here if we have governmental agencies like the FBI coming out and saying none of this happened. A rogue FBI agent investigated this, and online you'll find all sorts of interesting things with the McMartin preschool case, that these was a satanic molestation, a cult, so it is alleged, that was involved in all this. And people said, oh, well, this was all done as nonsense, yet there's tons of evidence to show that this was true, and we're either going to believe children or not. The children said what happened to them. They found evidence of a lot of this. What are we going to make of this? Now, I remember people at that particular location who found hundreds of turtle bones. Hundreds? Why? I've had turtles, and they certainly don't necessarily live that long, but they also don't necessarily die all the time. Very strange. Well, they do die a lot if they're used in some bizarre type of sacrifice. Goes on and on and on. They found their mountain cabin, and it was loaded with demonic symbols. So, and as I said, a former FBI agent went in there, investigated this, and found all this. What are we to make all this stuff? So, I mean, there's so much going on here that's a bigger picture. I've tried to warn people of this for many, many years, and of course this has incited attacks on me and this organization to extremely high levels. So I found out about all these people through the Roy Tuckman show in terms of their names came up, and then I looked at a actual introduction by Edred Thorson Flowers in his runic book, which was a great interest of mine at that particular time. And who does he thank? Michael Aquino, the founding ruler and continued ruler of the Temple of Set, the offshoot of the Church of Satan. Which is very interesting, and he made sure he went out and destroyed Anton LaVey, whatever was left there. But, you know, Anton LaVey never had a successful organization for more than a few years, and never did anything, and interestingly enough, his organization was destroyed by a divorce, as so many are, because all assets are fractured then. So, as we understand all these things, the pieces fall together. But whether somebody's going to confront this or not is interesting. But The Son of Sam is an interesting read. You can get The Ultimate Evil is an interesting read by Maury. I believe you can get it. You can get it on Kindle. I'll leave a link down here below. I think it's $5 or $6 on Kindle. Certainly something that is interesting for occult science students to understand. Well, Satanism isn't just jokeable little thing. The people involved in this are potentially extremely dangerous. Not potentially, have been proven to be dangerous, involved in all sorts of perverse practices. And they are highly connected, as David Icke and other ones have alleged as well, where the Queen was seen at certain ceremonies, and there's a lot of upper officials. So you're talking about everybody that runs this world as we know it, tends to be involved in these things. And a lot of them are involved in organizations that seem to be innate. Well, they have nice names and never been linked to this, but as I've heard a few people say, is that you don't have any idea what these people do. Certain sects of the Freemasons, etc., may be have been alleged to be involved in very negative practices and Satanism. Now, we're not talking about all of them, and basically I kind of like the Freemasons' philosophy, and it seems to be an interesting organization, but a lot of organizations have been infiltrated, where they come in, they take it over, and why not? That's the best way to have an organization instead of trying to start your own. So this has been stated about several organizations that have been infiltrated by certain groups of people. It's all very fascinating. It's an interesting story. Unfortunately, everything you've written about, read about, or know about satanic cults is true. And these are functioning today even at a higher level. Satanism has went from the filthy backroom dirt, from the porno palaces, the drug dens of society, into main society with pretty little face boys that talk about Satanism and ascension and other little things, as if it's just part of this normal satanic belief system. It has grabbed a lot of people. And a lot of people who you could say are quite middle of the road think that this is something that is completely acceptable and okay now. That this is nothing to worry about. There's nothing to bother about it. It's just an alternative belief system. But we're really the good guys. It's the bad guys, the traditional religions who have perverted you. You know, it was the fallen angels that gave you power, not the God or Jesus. Now, unfortunately, the mainstream religions are their own worst enemy. They have done nothing. They are made up of the weakest, sniveling, most backstabbing people you ever want to be involved with. I remember in my middle youth in the town I used to live in, or the area, that a lot of people wouldn't even take a check if it had the fish on it, because the fish was a way of suckering you. I've been suckered by people who tell me how religious they are. The first time if I hear that, of course, in recent years, I know for 100% that these people are frauds. I've heard this from several people that want to tell me how great they were, but they're actually Christians. Yeah, and they're as corrupt and as rotten as you can get, as all religions are. So we run into all these problems, and they're their own worst enemy. And as is sure with the trillions and trillions of dollars that the Vatican has and everything else, that they have done a proportional work of good. Matter of fact, I don't know of any good they've really done in any long term. I'm sure there are projects they can point to, and I'm sure they have. Catholic charities have done some apparently good work to help people. Well, I never see it, and I never see the world changing, as I see with the trillions of dollars, or at least billions and billions, that Bill Gates charities, where he's united with other ones, have done anything. Yeah, they have lists of people they give money to, but what has happened there? Who have they really helped? So all of that has very difficult to define if all that money has really done any good. They don't certainly seem to be working for the general good. They seem to be working for the elite and pass laws and empower organizations that are really helping elite causes. Well, we just don't know. We have to look into all that, but I'm certainly not a fan of Bill Gates and his general philosophy. He really hasn't come up with anything to rock the important things in this world, which is not vaccinations, but general health care. And he's not pushing that, here's a great medication that should be out there. He's not using his media outlets to make sure ivermectin is used because it's such a great proven drug. He's not doing things to have alternative fuels and push hydrogen. So he's not doing anything with alternative treatments in general. Why? The statistical data here is staggeringly in favor that all these things are amazing, right down to a very innate and non-dangerous therapy like intravenous, vitamin C, which has done amazing things. One doctor calls it the universal cure. Well, where's Bill Gates? Here's where you could make massive changes, but you're going to have to go face first into the stone door of the pharmaceuticals and all the people they own. Well, Mr. Richie Rich Money Pants doesn't really seem to be interested in that. He's pushing an agenda. Is vaccinations the answer? Is what been come up with there? And who do these people know to get into? Bill Gates doesn't know anything. He just has money. So he goes to experts to tell him that this is good. I don't know how much research he does, but the bottom line is that even if he does, he's getting research from certain individuals. What is he doing? So there's certainly no approaches here that have to do with any of this stuff. So you have to wonder with all that. And there certainly is plenty of talk and plenty of alleging that all of these types of things are going on with these kind of satanic practices that has been alleged that the Queen has done and everybody else basically. And all these strange cults where people have money they're involved in. Dubious organizations like Scientology has had a massive group of people following them, particularly at one time. And of course, that was the alternative religion, and it kind of made practical sense at one particular time. I'm not sure the details of it, but at that time, but certainly it gave you a practical alternative to a lot of comic book belief systems that you've got out of common religions. But what it's turned into today, and of course the leader of Scientology is quite a strange person who has passed away, L. Ron Hubbard. But it's a complicated situation, but these don't seem to be positive paths. So what all is this? So, and Hubbard did base a lot of his philosophies on old occult science, valid occult science as well. So what are we to make of all this stuff? What is going on today? But we're in very frightening times where people ignore this. And when I tell somebody's involved in a satanic cult or say this organization is making certain tools and they're Satanists, people go on YouTube being filmed showing radionic machines that sitting next to a self-avowed Satanist. They're not hiding it. E.O. Kennedy apparently is making radionic and sorts of tools himself because, after all, he is the student of Carl Welts, who is very old now, and I don't know if he's passing the baton to this satanic organization, but he certainly should, so we all know where his technology really comes from, but from his beliefs. Now, he put all this stuff online, stating what he was doing at that time. So, I mean, it's irrefutable that he's into this. So, and almost nobody knows this. But he had black magic software, he had all sorts of things that were targeting people and using very negative energies as part of his radionic practices. So this is how it filters down through everything and how it is endemic in all of our social systems. And we just don't know how many people who claim to have smiley faces are not really involved in these kind of negative practices. We just don't know. But we should be aware of it. And I don't think that we can run around wearing symbols that represent the worst aspect of the human being and just fluff it off as that's Hollywood, that's part of that group. Would you do that if that was going through the regular populace? If you ran around with a swastika on the front of your shirt, would you think that you would get oh, it's just that band that does that. Yeah, it's a phase she's going through. So the whole idea is, do you think that's okay? Of what that represented? Well, I don't think that would be okay with most people. But the bottom line is that, and even that would be more acceptable because the swastika was stolen. The swastika is used all around the world. And to this day is used heavily in India as a good luck sun symbol. So if anything, you should be able to wear without running into problems, but you're not going to wear a swastika without being connected to Nazism, which few people say is great. So, but you can wear a pentagram and people don't think anything of it. Oh, that's funny, or that's connected to a rock group. Well, I don't think any of that's funny. And I think that ignorance like that is what really hurts people. We can't accept the fact that, oh, this is just a symbol of a rock band. It's kind of a badass. No, I don't think that's acceptable. I'm not sure why you have to wear a symbol like that. There's certainly other strong symbols out there that you can wear. You don't need to wear that. There's a lot tied into that, just like, unfortunately, there's a lot tied into the swastika. I would never use a swastika because of the problem with that, even though this goes back thousands of years and is used by many different groups. But is that appropriate? Well, there's very few people who are going to say that's appropriate, but it doesn't seem to be a problem to wear an inverted pentagram, another stolen and twisted symbol, by people who have a long history that continues in the public eye without a problem. Of course, Nazism continues, and there's been very little changes in terms of that. But the bottom line is that it's no longer public and in your face, and people don't run around with this symbol everywhere. To run around with a symbol stating this very negative image is horrendous. So I hope this has opened up everyone's eyes. We hope to... I've reported a lot on this, and of course, anytime you use the term Satanism, you're immediately, any value you get from your video on YouTube is taken out, so you're demonetized. This is a frightening term, and of course, I'm not sure if I was an advertiser, I'd necessarily want to be connected with it, but there's a lot of interest in all this stuff. So it appears. But of course, none of what I speak will ever get out to the interested masses on this station because of the direct suppressing of anything that comes from my channel. Speak the truth and you will be suppressed. Does anybody come out? Do you think your buddies in the Christian community? I have Christians who worked with Satanists. I know directly the kind of filth that most Christians are. They are corrupt, they are evil, and they are hateful. That's who they are. And that as, of course, a generality. You know a good guy here, you know a good... That's nothing to do with that. We're speaking in generalities as a belief system. All religions have done nothing for this society since their inception. And certainly Satanism, which has been around now for God knows how long, certainly hasn't formed society in any good way either. The idealistic fake Satanism that is perpetrated by E.A. Kennedy and others, of that this is just a path that rejects the corrupt Christianity, is a really bogus viewpoint, and they're into nasty, disgusting things that are illegal and debased, I allege. I'm not saying that directly of Kennedy, but the people that the philosophy he teaches breeds that. So I have no idea what he's in personally, even though he was arrested for drug use and gun possession. And I'm not sure what happened with any of that stuff. But the bottom line is that that is part and parcel of these kind of negative realities that we need to be aware of. So, as usual, life is about this great struggle. And part of this great struggle is the fight against evil, which virtually no one does. Until next time.